Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. First of all, let's verify the meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it was.
In attendance tonight, we have Mr. McCaffrey, Ms. Madden, Ms. Rounachek, and Mr. Como have been excused. Opportunity for citizens to speak. Do we have any citizens here for speaking tonight? I see we have friends in the audience, but no. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, committee issues, presentation of preliminary budget. Mr. Clark.
Included in your packet is, and we're working on the actual budget document that we hope to hand out Wednesday night to the full board. But we gave you the DPI format of the preliminary budget to share. And then next thing later in the agenda is your approval of the publication of the preliminary budget and then the approval of the public hearing date. So the current budget is, I'm sure you're aware, there is no state budget yet, so this budget is based on a set of assumptions. So I'll just walk you through some of the key assumptions as part of our building of the budget. The first one is a 2% drop in state equalization aid. At our last meeting, we walked through some different aid scenarios, so we went with what we believe to be a pretty conservative aid estimate at this point, with a 2% drop. The resulting tax levy is basically flat, a 0.04% tax levy increase. We are building this on the assumption of losing 96 resident pupils, which is based off of our enrollment projection from, I believe, the spring of 2016. That's a document we'll probably be updating in the next year or so just to keep it current. And then the tax rate, we are basing it off a 1.5% increase in property tax value in the school district. Again, this is the DPI format. You're used to looking at an object summary report, but I can tell you this budget is built on a 5.3% increase in health insurance premiums, on board actions that's been taken in terms of salary adjustments for staff or pending salary adjustments for staff. So a lot of that information on the expense side is known. So all those things have been incorporated into this document. The last page, or the second to last page, is the tax levy summary. Shows you the calculation from the revenue limit and then from the revenue limit down to what our property tax levy ends up being. In the middle of the page, though, the top half of the page is the revenue limit per calculation. You will notice that we are losing $1 million, or nearly $1.1 million in revenue limit authority based on the governor's budget, which was no multiplier increase per pupil. The per pupil adjustment we've been looking at in the state budget is the per pupil aid number, not revenue limit. Aid's a categorical aid, so it comes to us without any taxation or local taxation funding it. If they add it to the revenue limit, then you get into local property taxes, potentially increases, and that's, with an election year not too far off, that's not likely to happen this go-around. So the reason we're able to have that basically flat levy at this point is the loss of that revenue limit authority. On the bottom part of the sheet, you can see the different pieces. The 2.02% drop in aid results in $49.4 million in aid, and then we work our way down. We don't have much in terms of debt. We have some Fund 38 debt, which is tied to the energy efficiency projects. If you recall, we paid off the OPEB debt this year, so that's no longer part of the calculation. Fund 41 is the maintenance budgets, and you run those costs through Fund 41 for aid purposes. There's a benefit to us as a negative aided district to do so. The levy itself is down $29,000, which isn't, it's a lot of money in some conversations, but in terms of our levy, when you're looking at a $79.3 million local property tax levy, we're basically flat. And then the rate, you can see we are anticipating a 13-cent drop, again, based on the 1.5% increase in property valuation. We don't know that number until October. We don't know our final aid number until October. I'm assuming we'll have a state budget by October, depending on how many roads they want to pave or whatever the last few arguments are over.
And this, excuse me, and this, sorry to interrupt, and this, you have Fund 80, is that 100,000 Fund 80?
That was the last resource officer we added to the middle school. If you remember, the board took action on that last year, so that's what that represents, is that officer that, well, it was a much larger agreement, but it serves all 3 middle schools, and then it also, not that we're paying for, but each elementary school has been assigned an officer, not that they're there every day, but is a first response or a first person to contact with issues. So that's what that $100,000 represents, is the addition of the 4th resource officer. The next page is tied to our next, or one of our action items. We are on pace and in line with what we originally started out with the budget calendar, but if you look at September 13th, that's a Wednesday, that's our board meeting night. I threw that in here because this is when we had the budget hearing last year. I don't know if you want to go much later than September 13th, but that's the date that we're recommending. We would meet at 6:30 ahead of the full board meeting. If you recall, our budget hearings tend to be very short events, so the action item that's on the agenda in a few items is to approve that date and the publication of the budget. Questions? And keep in mind, none of this is final until the end of October. We still have the voucher choice program data to come. That'll come in mid to late October, along with the aid numbers. So we'll be finalizing as we do every year. The board will take action. I think I have between either the 23rd or 30th. There's an extra Monday or extra board potential meeting day in October.
So will we be budgeting any money to go into that deferred fund that we have, the special fund we set up for Fund 46? Yeah.
No. There's no money being budgeted there. I was hoping that we'd have a little, we're going to touch on our year-end estimate for 16-17, having some money left over. Health insurance ran, hotter is the right word. It was more expensive than what we had, so it kind of negated that. To me, Fund 46 is something we look at the end of a fiscal year, because unlike 41 where you have to levy it at the beginning of your fiscal year and you can't change that number, Fund 46 you can transfer dollars into at any time. And that's the flexibility that one provides. And I think that's something we look at more and more each year, because if you remember, from the date of the first deposit, we can't spend that money for 5 years. Now I've been here almost 2 years, so it must be coming up on 2 years. 2 out of the 5 are close to coming to conclusion. So, and once you reach that 5 year on that first deposit, then the fund is truly be in and out the same day if you wanted to.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Anything else, Mr. Clark, on the issue?
No, that should be it.
Okay.
We'll certainly be providing you updates once that state budget is finalized, and any adjustments that we foresee needed between now and this budget. Once it's published, regardless if the state budget comes through, once it's published, it will be what we present at the budget hearing, and then the changes will come after that time as we finalize everything in October, or for October.
So one of the points you make in the background is the enrollment decrease projection, which isn't necessarily directly, we still use a 3-year rolling average for, okay. So our 3-year rolling average number will be down not quite as bad as 96, I don't suppose.
If you look at the back of the packet is actually the revenue limit calculation on the left-hand side, and kind of in the middle.
Didn't bring my glasses, Darren.
Oh, well, then I can really play with the numbers then. The 3-year rolling average in your base year, based on 14, 15, 16, is 12,826. And then the new 3-year rolling average is 12,699. So actually, on the 3-year averages, you're losing more than 99 kids, or 96 kids.
127 FTE.
You're losing 127.
So it's more painful than the number of kids we're losing this particular
Right,
year.
and when we're building the budget and we reference that loss, it's September count to September count, not 3-year rolling average to 3-year rolling average. And what's happening there and what's driving that number to be larger is you're losing a year that had, in 14, 12,988 kids, and you're actually gaining a year in 2017 that's 12,606 kids.
Oh, okay. From
So-
the year to this, okay.
That's why the 3-year average and the year-to-year are always, not always, I mean, there's a scenario where they're the same, but more than likely they're different.
So is there a no harm offset for declining enrollment that we're taking advantage of, or?
Yeah, the hold harmless and the declining enrollment exemption will protect you that first year, but over time, it protects you on the way down, but once our enrollment does turn around, it holds you back as you climb your way out of the 3-year rolling average being decreases. So, in this year,
Exemption is 1.2 million.
yeah, the declining enrollment exemption is 1.2 million and the hold harmless is 1.2 million. So between the two, they're almost $2.5 million of one-time exemption funds. Then that money goes away. Then they net it out as they calculate your base that you build off of for next year. So it gives you a 1-year, I don't know if coupon's the right word or pass.
We'll feel it more next year.
Exactly. Because we keep losing that, we started the conversation with that lost revenue limit authority. We've been dropping, even though the multiplier per student's been flat the last several years, you're just multiplying it by fewer and fewer kids each year.
Well, I have no other questions. I guess we can move on then. Next item is, I guess we'll move into our action items, right? Monthly vouchers.
Okay, I did receive some questions, so I'll quickly go through those. Voucher number 315357 for Northwest Evaluation Association. It's a voucher for $114,250. And the question was, this is for MAPS testing, and the question was, is this the full fee for all schools for the school year? And the answer to that is yes. It covers everything for the year. And that includes breakdown, it's broken down by the different types of tests that they take, and one-time fee, about the same every year. Changes a little bit with enrollment.
What was that amount again?
$114,250 for this year, and I think last year was like $113,000 if I remember.
Mr. Gray, I think that's a pretty important progression test, is it, that we use, the MAPS test?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's probably more reliable than anything else we've used because the state test has changed so many times. It's changed 3 times in the last couple of years. ACT will be good now, once we get probably 5 years of data on that, and we have 2 more to go. But the MAP testing has been, we've been able to use that to work with parents and show parents' individual progress.
Okay, the next question came on voucher number 315367 for Hein Electric Supply for $5,533.05, and it was basically asking what is that for. It was for a total of 67 LED lights for South. And I know that Glenn had several light replacement projects this year that were budgeted in, and so. I'm not sure. We are trying to, this year, now that our new AP person has a year under their belt, expand our use of the P card. So we're going to be following up with the vendors to see.
You may not know this, but do we shop around on those prices? Because I'm familiar.
That I don't know. I can follow up with Glenn.
Yeah. Yes, but
Buy from them because they're close, or? Shopping around for that many lights.
Back to you.
Yeah, just shoot me an email.
The one thing you gotta be careful about is the quality of the LED lights are,
yeah,
there's a lot of cheap
Range.
ones out there that aren't, so.
All you do need is a SKU number though, and shop almost anywhere for it.
sure, we can follow up with that.
And by the way, just a background for, I know this unlikely anyone's watching, but
There's two people watching at least.
we did have an energy efficiency project, and one of the things we did not put on the energy efficiency project was a massive replacement of lights, because we've been doing that kind of as an ongoing basis within the district and didn't feel that was appropriately to put on as a massive, it was part of what we cut out of that proposed upgrade at that time, so.
Plus the price on those things have dropped so far, so fast, that part of it's quality sometimes, but just overall.
So we do try to manage our regular budget rather than just going off the special things, and I think that's worked out well for us, so.
Okay, next voucher question was for check number 315385 for $3,330 payable to the Classic 8 Conference. And the question was, is this for WIAA payment, and is it for one school or all schools? Classic 8 Conference is, the best I can describe it, is like a consortium that it was 8 schools belong to, now 9, because Oconomowoc has joined it. And that group handles all of the booking of the referees, the coordination of tournaments, and just a lot of things it takes off the plates of the AD, and they do a very efficient job of coordinating it. The feedback I got from one of the schools was, please don't make them go away. Said we had no intention of that.
And
But-
doesn't Oconomowoc have to pay a $100,000 joining fee?
I would think they'd have to have some kind of capital contribution.
Yeah, to come into our conference, which,
After we've established it this well,
$100,000 just to have our name, Classic 8, well, whatever we're
Not
gonna be.
changing the name.
They're not changing the
They're
name,
not changing the name.
of
well,
course.
the Big Ten hasn't changed it either, so.
Right, and that was what I was told. Well, the Big Ten didn't change their name, and everybody likes Classic 8 and everything.
Yeah, 100,000 from Oconomowoc, and we split it among the 7, because we wouldn't give any to Arrowhead.
Right.
Right,
Kind of want to give it to them.
No, I don't think so.
yeah.
So anyways, the $3,330 was for North. We've paid that same fee for both South and West. And there are additional fees throughout the year depending on how many tournaments we enter, because tournaments are billed out separately. I was asked for the total for this year, but I put for 16-17, we'd paid a total of $15,866 to the Classic 8 Conference. North and South both paying $5,592, and West paying $4,682. Apparently, they had a slow fall tournament season compared to the other two.
And keep in mind, when they do have tournaments, they can charge for those, and so there is a revenue offset to that. When we have a WIA event, we get to keep some of the money to offset the cost. So if there's costs that go to the Classic 8, we're able to recoup those through ticket sales and so on.
Questions on that? And the final question had to do with the P card. And the question was, why do they all show up with the same description, which basically says AP credit card payment? And that is a Skyward thing. Skyward automatically populates, Skyward will generate all the invoices for us from the credit card processing. So the principals and secretaries go in, they approve their purchases, they attach copies of receipts to the purchases in Skyward, and then Skyward creates all the invoices so that we don't have to manually create them. What it does, though, is put in this generic descriptor in every one of them. It does create a report when the main invoice is being generated that gives more detail, and we could certainly print this and copy this along with the packet every month, if you'd like to take a look at it and see if it gives you more information, that would be useful. The thing is, we can update and change that description, but we have to balance that with $12 invoices and how much extra work it is to have someone manually go in and type the main invoice. This is the invoice detail that comes along with it for each and every purchase.
There's some rules on the P card with transaction limits, I assume, and
There's,
who has the authority to use them and things like that.
right, the rules are that they are not allowed to hand the card out to go have people shop. They're not allowed to purchase gift cards. The sites have fairly small limits to begin with. Some of the areas have bigger limits than here, but again, like teaching and learning, they have one person that manages the purchases, and all purchases that need to use the P card go through her. So we do limit people being able to go out and just grab a card and run to the store and buy something. And we don't allow, like I said, gift cards because you just can't track that.
The average, and I know we've tweaked some, but like at elementary school, the principal's P card, I think is $2,500.
Every principal starts out with $2,500, and if they are using it and show that they have a need for it, then it gets looked at and evaluated. But the limits are kept pretty small at the schools.
So it's one guy, Darren Clark. Yeah.
Yeah. Mine
We'll have
is
to have
the
a
one
talk,
that,
we'll have to have a talk with him.
my card's the one that's used to pay off Apple and Aramark.
Yeah, we appreciate
and,
that too. That's technology.
But we did on, it was in one of the Friday updates, generate in cash back of nearly 80,000, was it 79 or $78,000? So,
79, I think it was. So.
with Aramark and Apple being the two big drivers of that, obviously.
Like I said, now going into this year, we are going to be more proactive in seeking vendors that will allow us to pay with the P card to try to increase that for next year,
Yeah, we shouldn't be solely dependent on Apple and Aramark for that.
right?
No, but they sure boost the numbers pretty quick. Especially Aramark, I mean, that's a monthly. Like this school year, we didn't even have a large Apple purchase, so you, I don't know,
Quick question, maybe you know this off the top of your head, but what's the cost of Skyway as a service for the district?
Gosh, I just signed off on that bill. I should know that.
I assume that it's a reasonably sized bill, I mean, for a district this size.
Yeah, I would rather at financials and HR,
HR.
so
Yeah,
payroll
we're not
and
using it for
everything.
Yeah,
campus for,
okay, we won't force you to guess, that would
Yeah,
probably
I-
not be
you
appropriate.
could follow up in the
I
email.
will follow up and send a note out because I don't want to
Yeah, I don't wanna guess
misspeak on
either,
that.
right?
Yeah. Any other questions on the vouchers? Did you have any other call-ins?
That was it.
Do I have a motion for approval of the monthly vouchers?
Move approval for the monthly vouchers.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McCaffrey, a second by Ms. Madden. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. There are no oppositions. Okay. Motion passes 3-0. Next action item is approval of the 2017-18 budget for publication.
Yeah, the publication format was in that earlier packet, so I didn't re-include it.
Oh, this is what we're going to put in the paper, though.
Oh, that's right. This is what we put in the newspaper. This is just a fun summary. One thing I like about this report is it gives you the fund balance numbers in the funds, and the revenues and expenditures, a nice one-page snapshot of our overall budget. We're looking at just under $180 million in total revenue and expenditures. And again, this is just a procedural thing to prepare us for the budget hearing. The greater detail will be in the budget booklet that we'll get to the board on Wednesday night for that meeting. So if there's any other questions on the budget?
The only other question is, it's such a bland thing, showing a bunch of numbers in the paper, it's an official budget. I mean, I'm sure it's a notice that we provide. Can it be jazzed up a little bit with, is it possible to add something to that rather than just that they could write as an article on top of it, or we could provide as a press release associated with that coming out? At least provide a press release regarding, you know.
Might be able to dig something up on maybe last year's tax information.
Or something
cost per
positive.
pupil.
Yeah, something positive about how our balances have been managed over the last 5 years.
Highlight, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, so I'll just start out there, the closure of the OPEB, so we could remind people of accomplishing that this past year.
Yeah, it's probably too abstract, but sometimes just, I mean, you could do that, sure, that'd be nice, but I just think the overall numbers look good.
But we could, I can work with Terry and come up with, I know cost per pupil, we do very well. Tax rate here in McGuanago are always at the low end of that. With their recent referendum, I would think we've probably overpassed them in terms of having the lowest, I'm guessing. But we could come up with some.
I think even as something, a nice story would be comparing us to, from 10 years ago. You know, go back far enough where,
In terms of fund balance?
Back to June of 2008.
yeah, 10 years, well, 10 years ago, and we could do that every year, this year to 10 years earlier, and
Right.
and because that's a far enough back picture that
Sure.
you know shows. You don't have to do every year. Just say, here's this snapshot today, and here's what it was 10 years ago,
Right, yeah.
with bars, so that not prison bars, but bars graphs. Yeah. Mr. McCaffrey.
A couple questions. Fund 73, the Employee Trust Fund, what is that?
That's what's left of the fund or the trust that the board created for the
Okay.
OPEB.
Okay.
And that's actually that was dissolved, so.
Right.
I don't know, I don't know if whatever funds are in there may have to be shifted
And
somewhere else.
actually, it's,
Technically, that trust doesn't exist anymore.
the auditors are coming back in
Yeah, they'll tell us.
2 weeks, and it'll probably be a year-end adjusting entry. Sherry and I have talked about, I couldn't remember, I thought we had formally dissolved the trust, and if we have, they'll just move, I mean, it's $1,100, they'll just do a journal entry and move them to Fund 10 or wherever.
But that's one of those that would be a nice comparison, right? Because we did have an employee trust fund 10 years ago. And it was sizable.
And then the scholarship, Fund 72?
Yes.
That-
We get money from community, different areas in the community that provide scholarships for the student. Some scholarship donees want to make the decisions and give the money out themselves. Others say, here, school, here's the money. You come up with your criteria and donate it however you want. So that's the money that, it's basically an in and out. We get money in, then we pay it out to the schools directly, not to the students. So it's pretty much an in and an out. There's a few, it has a little bit of a fund balance because there's some that were memorial funds that you got a big chunk of money and then it sat in there and it gets ticked away a little bit every year.
And then capital expansion, what is that? $1,000 in there.
Oh, yep, that's the pot of money that we have, that's set aside, that we can use or we can start using 5 years after
Okay.
it's been set aside.
Yep.
It helps if you've got excess money at the end of the year that you don't want it to hit against you with your aid for the following year. You can put it into a Fund 46 account and save it for capital projects for later.
Okay. And then the last question I have is the Community Service Fund 80. It's down to 5,600. Are we expecting that to sunset?
Yes, the fund balance is expected to disappear. What's been being paid out of that is the String Academy
Oh, okay.
contributions, and after the end of this year, it will have to look at what are we going to do with that, because now it's down to it'll be down to $5,600, and the only thing that'll be funding it after that is the tax levy that's funding the officer. There's also half salaries of people, the community relations people, or community liaison, excuse me. We'll have to look at, does that change funding to go to a different part of the budget?
Thank you very much.
The Fund 46, the capital expansion, and these are names that DPI provides these funds.
Yeah,
that
I've
they're
never
not,
seen that name, but I know we just
they're,
talked about.
they're not ours. But I just looked up in our budget booklet, we moved $1,000 because it was gonna be locked up for 5 years, and we'll be able to expend those dollars. Again, we've earned $6 in interest over the last 18 to 20 months, or whatever it is. But we'll footnote it in the budget document when we'll actually have access to those dollars again.
And I believe it opened last May of 2016.
So 21, yeah, May of 21, which sounds a long ways away, but. Mm-hmm.
So then,
Okay, so we need a motion on the matter at hand.
I move approval of the 2017-18 budget for publication.
Second that.
Mr. McCaffrey motioned and Ms. Madden second. Any further discussion? With all of that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, motion passes 3-0. Next action item, approval of a public hearing date.
As I mentioned earlier, we had scheduled or put in there as a placeholder September 13th at 6:30, right before the board meeting, to have the budget hearing. That's where we've done it the last couple of years, in terms of roughly in the middle of September. So the administration's recommended that we proceed with the 13th.
I have a motion for approval of the public hearing date.
Move approval of the public hearing date for the budget of September 13th, 2017 at 6:30 PM.
I will second that motion.
Approval, or motion by Mr. McCaffrey, second by Ms. Madden. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, motion passes 3-0. Information items, 2016-17 budget update. Mr. Clark.
Yeah, we have, the preliminary work on the audit is complete, and obviously we're in August now, so we're in the second month of the 17-18 school year, but we wanted to give you a rough estimate of where we are. I can tell you this year-end number is changing, not significantly, but often as journal entries are finalized and receivables are set up, et cetera. So overall, we usually measure how did year-end come out by looking at Fund 10's change in fund balance. So overall, we're looking at adding $2.5 million to Fund 10 fund balance at the end of the 16-17 school year, but that includes the settlement, the OPEB settlement. Very much a one-time transaction. It's a transaction we won't get in 17-18, I don't believe, unless they send it to us, and that'd be great, if anyone's listening. So what I try to do is walk you through on the next page with the charts, and I think it's one distinction that I'm often asked about fund balance and what that number is and what it's for. But we had a couple of things. When we budgeted the yellow column, if you remember, when we approved the 16-17 budget, we approved the use of over $1 million to make an extra principal and interest payment on our OPEB debt. We didn't know the settlement would be coming literally 2 months later. So that budget automatically in December was kind of blown up by the receipt of all those funds and the paying off of all that debt. So what our unaudited actuals, even though we're pretty much finalized, has us gaining $2.5 million in fund balance and doing $4 million better than what we had anticipated. You know, all good things. But again, that settlement just kind of skews all these numbers. So what I wanted to do was kind of break out where we ended up in terms of kind of a net figure. So the far larger right box is our fund balance, and there's several categories of fund balance. The good old days of designated and undesignated fund balance are gone now. There's 5 or 6 categories, and but I try to simplify it. We have basically 2 types of fund balance: unrestricted, which is kind of your standard and what the number is you should use when comparing us to 2008 or 1993, because we weren't self-funded in health insurance at the time. Now we set aside funds specifically for health insurance, restricted fund balance. And at the last August, the board approved adding $772,000 to that fund, which brought it up to $5.7 million. But at the end of this fiscal year, we had to do a journal entry to expense $907,000 beyond what we had budgeted, because claims ran higher than what we had thought. We've had several good years with the self-funded health insurance. It's been I think a very solid choice for the school district to move to self-funding, but you have bad years, just like you do when you're self-insured. The only difference is we need to look at a funding rate adjustment to maintain some level of reserves. The difference is when you're fully insured, your rates go up. It's really kind of the same mechanisms, just slightly different accounting approach to it. So we, in the journal entry calculation, the health claims payable is on the next page. And I circled it and put required year end. This is an auditing required journal entry for claims that are out there but yet have not been expended. So our reserves for health insurance have dropped to $4.8 million. Our unrestricted fund balance, again, OPEBs, or the OPEB settlement's in there. If we wouldn't have had the OPEB settlement, we would have been in the hole about $500,000 roughly. A couple things driving that. We received less than Medicaid aid reimbursement than what we had anticipated. Tried to squeeze as much of the planetarium expenditures in there. And there was one other thing I was going to mention that ran a little hotter. But if health insurance would have came in where we budgeted, we would have been adding $500,000 to fund balance. So that's a really tricky number because you can't predict where your claims are going to go. You might be able to identify a trend, but there's really no trend in health insurance. People get sick at different ages and at different times and different diseases and all those things. So when I predict year end early, I'm assuming we're going to hit health insurance on the nose. What we budgeted is what we're going to spend, and it's going to work out great. Some years that'll be right, some years that won't be right. But so overall, we did some great things. We were just talking about things that maybe could go into a press release. We have paid off the OPEB settlement early, or received the settlement and paid off the debt early, saving $286,000 in interest. We have increased, and it was incorporated in the budget we just looked at, a 5.3% increase in health insurance. I'll call them premiums, even though it's a funding rate for us because we're self-insured. So we are incorporating an increase to deal with the additional expenditures. Our reserves, the target is to have 4 months of average health insurance expenditures. We have 3. I'd like to get that up to 4. It might take us a few years, and then we might have a year that knocks us back to 3.5 or whatever. So overall, I think we had a very solid fiscal year. So I'll answer any questions you might have on the health insurance or year end, or again, it's not final. These aren't audited numbers, but we think we're pretty close.
So when I look at this net monthly activity, been negative way more months than we've been positive. And we had one big positive month, otherwise it would have been a pretty bad year.
Mm-hmm.
So we must be looking at rate increases.
Yeah, like I said, we've budgeted a 5.3% rate increase.
And the rate increases have been almost very low.
We've held them flat or relatively flat for at least 2 years. Now, some of that was the rolling out of the high deductible health, I mean, there was other factors involved. But the target or the goal had been consistency, both budget-wise, but also what staff was being asked to pay, for their 12% portion. So we have up until now been able to pull that off. But I think everyone knows you're fighting a 8 to 10% trend in health insurance, so it's a constant battle. There's no cure to that as of yet.
So for the people that may or not be watching this, our increase in rates are a function of consumption, direct consumption by our employees. So it's not that we're covering some extra risk, because all the risk is internal to within ourselves, right? Whereas when you talk about rate increases under the Affordable Care Act, it's because insurance companies are having to cover a lot more people that are sicker without having healthier people in. So it drives up their risk profile, whereas our risk profile stays constant because we're working with the same group of employees, and we're not working with a separate insurer. We're self-insured. So being self-insured protects you from the so-called impact of Affordable Care Act on everybody else who's under, exposed to that risk, of the uncertainty of the Affordable Care Act.
Plus, we have the wellness program too, which does help. That's geared towards our staff and the people who are on our health plan, which I would hope I say it does have some impact on lifestyles, which decreases how much we use.
Mr. McCaffrey?
So the 5.3% increase, is that going to be 5.3%? Like, for instance, the 12% that our employees pay, that's going to go up?
Yes. They're gonna take on 12% of that 5.3.
Okay, just want to make sure. And do you know something happened to bad year?
Just more claims, just more utilization, no
Doesn't,
specific thing. And just so the public and our employees know, we don't get specific information tied to specific people. So when I answer these questions, it's in general data that we get. We had more high-cost claims this year than we had had.
Does the cost
The clinic is incorporated into our overall health insurance solution, and those costs have gone up slightly. We're not looking to add any services soon, so that's not a driver. The clinic is probably 4% of our overall health insurance spend, so it's not that it's not a factor, it's just not a significant one.
we were talking about adding services to the clinic. When is that going to happen? We were talking about adding some.
We added PT in September of last year,
Okay.
so that's in there.
That's already done and
Yep.
staffed and
Yes.
equipped.
Yep.
I had the chance to experience Muskego's services. And it so happens Muskego Services is the same group of people who performs Waukesha services. And so the same person that was at Muskego's at Waukesha, she described Waukesha as Grand Central Station compared to Muskego, because it's such a much larger, because of the county and the city involved. Muskego's just Muskego, Norway. And
Did they partner with other governmental bodies, or is it just the school district? That
it's the
ended
school
up just
district.
that?
Yeah, and it's a clinic right there at the high school. A room that you can draw blood, things like that. But I haven't been at our own facility here with the county. I'm sure it's a much more elaborate. But she does say it's like Grand Central Station compared to what.
Yeah, I think we have some significant advantages that, A, it's a standalone building, so you don't have to go to the high school to go to your clinic, and just the number of people being served is significantly different.
Now, on the other hand, if on the other flip side of the coin, when the government's subsidizing premiums for people who can't pay, or health care for people who can't pay, should that end, our rates would probably go up, because now the hospitals would be having to absorb the cost of people who don't pay instead of collecting that money from the government. When they absorb those costs, they pass it on to the charges to the general care. So if you know, changes in healthcare can have an impact on what we pay year to year. But right now, that part of it stabilizes. It's just basically a straight claims basis.
I put in that box in the lower left-hand column, you know, we're targeting 4 months of reserves, but I'm willing to go higher. In this environment, where health insurance could do 1,000 different things, I think we always look to, you know, you're weighing a lot of interests, but I don't think we should cap ourselves at 4 months if we get to that point, because it's very fluid right now.
I would agree, because I think of our flexibility, 4 months isn't a lot of flexibility for rate increases. And if rates do jump because of a significant change in the Affordable Care Act, which means the government decides not to pick up the cost of these high-cost things, which is what still hasn't been decided yet. They sound like they might decide that over the next 30 days. But that would be that could be a 15, 20% increase on what the healthcare providers would charge things like the school district of Waukesha. You know, everybody wants to blame the insurance companies, but at the end of the day, it's whatever the healthcare providers charge for the most part, and who pays and who doesn't pay. So.
Yeah, it's a big part of what we do. It's a big spend for us, and we put a lot of, Chris Hedstrom and I put a lot of time, and Melissa, who's here pretty often, we spend a lot of time on health insurance and the clinic, and overall, I think, you know, if you have a reserve that's 3 months, I think you're on solid footing, but things can change. And also keep in mind, even the number of what a monthly spend is, if medical inflation is going up 8 to 10%, that's a moving target in and of itself, potentially. So it's something that we are forced to monitor throughout the year.
Any more questions on the budget update? Okay, with that, we'll move on to, we have guests here tonight. They're on the last thing. It's an information item, but charter school draft contracts. And Mr. Clark, I'm a little confused. Did we get two identical
Yeah,
documents?
no, I'll explain what that is.
Oh, okay. And in my favorite subject topic, I didn't see Montessori among the documents. I don't know if they're in there as well, or?
No, it was not. This is just the two high school health academies. There is and I think my secretary maybe have put them in the wrong, but there's the old health academy and the new one. I think she kind of crossed them up a little bit, but they should be, you know, we're not gonna go over them tonight, but they're for your reading pleasure. And then we would look at them at the September meeting. You know, if you have questions in the meantime, then we'll you know, enter that, we'll go over those, and then on the September FNF meeting, we can review and hopefully approve and go to the board meeting.
So, just for clarity purposes, Mr. Gray, could you have, if there's a need for new documents, could you have them distributed to FNF people at the board meeting on Wednesday?
Yes, I will. I just, I'm assuming they're they may have just been stapled in the wrong order.
Okay,
So
and,
there should be the new one and the old one here.
yeah, it's just not clear, and then, it'd be easier to make sure we know what we're looking at when we're looking at.
If you look halfway through,
Okay,
one's the engineering and one's
Yeah,
the health insurance.
got that, but I got two
Right.
identical documents here. They're both that way, and they're not identical, but
Okay.
it's not clear which one's the old and which one's
Oh,
the new.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And,
I think they might have been stapled.
and Montessori, is it coming up as well?
No, that's not a charter agreement, that's just a contract.
That's just a contract. Are we gonna be looking at that contract anytime soon? We do have to approve that. Do we have to approve that?
The last time we did it, I think we approved it for multiple years.
Yeah, I think we have at least one
Yeah,
more year.
we had
don't
the trial year, and then we went out, I think, 3 years.
Okay. And the question I have on the charter school, is there any significant, I mean, we still have,
The only
we still
changes-
have control over these like we
Yeah.
have in the past? Or
Yes.
are we
Yeah.
gonna turn it into STEM, which we
No,
don't
no.
have control
Well,
over?
we have total control over that too.
We have
But
no control over STEM.
the only changes were ones that the DPI required us to make. So
Okay.
it's just gonna be some of that language.
Okay.
Otherwise, they should all be the same.
So can we receive a summary of the DPI required changes that in the
Sure,
board?
yep. Yep.
Along with an
Yeah.
update on this
Yeah.
on Wednesday night?
Like I said, you have a month to take a look at this. So
Anybody have any questions on the documents in front of them? Okay, good. Thank you very much for that. Now we need a motion for adjourning to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.851E for the purpose of consideration of offers regarding district property. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
I will second.
I have a motion from Mr. McCaffrey, second from Ms. Madden. This is a roll call vote.
Yes,
Mr. McCaffrey?
Aye.
Mr. O'Brien?
Aye.
aye.
Motion passes 3-0. We will move to executive session.